Alright, Emergency Response Guidebook, Response Guidebook 2016 Orange Book. We finished the Orange Book Guide. Now we're using Introduction Green Table Initial Isolation Protective Action Distances. Table 1 Initial Isolation Protective Action Distance suggests distance useful to people to vapor as a result of the spills involved with the dangerous scope of the considered toxic inhalation and poisonous inhalation in the United States. The list of it includes the certain chemical warfare agents material that produce toxic gas upon contact with water. Table 1 produced the first to respond to initial guidance until the technical qualified emergency response personnel are available. Initial isolation zone is defined the surrounding incident with which person may expose the dangerous upwind, life-threatening downwind concentration material. Protective action zone is defined as the downwind of the incident with which the person become incapacitated, unable to take protective action, incur serious and irreversible health effects. Table 1 produces specific guidance for the small and large spills occurring day or night. Adjusting distance specific incidents may involve independent variables should be made only by personnel technically qualified to make such adjustment. For this reason, no precise guidance may be provided in the document aid adjusting the total distance. However, the general guidelines follow. Factor may change with the protective action distances. The orange bordered guide of the material clearly indicated the under the section evacuation distance required for the protective fragmentation hazard. Large containment of the material becomes involved with the fire. The toxic hazard may be less than fire or explosion hazard. In this case, the fire distance should be used. Initial isolation protective action distance guidebook to derive the historical data of the transportation incident euphemistic models for worst scenarios involved with intensive instantaneous release entire contents of package result. Terrorism, sabotage, catastrophic event. Distance may increase the substantial for the such events. For the double initial isolation protective action distance is appropriate with the absence of the other information. If more than one tanker car and toxic inhalation materials are involved with an incident is leaking, large spills distance may be needed to increase. For material protective actions distance of 7 miles, the actual distance can be larger than certain atmospheric conditions. Dangerous vapor plume and channeled belly between many tall buildings distance may be larger, shown in table 1. Less mixing plume in the atmosphere daytime. Small regions known strong inversion snow cover that occurring near sunset may require increased protective action distance. Airborne contamination mixes dispensing slowly and may travel much farther downwind. In such case, the nighttime protective action distance may be more appropriate. In addition, protective action distance may be larger in liquid spills, either the material outdoor exposure temperatures of 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Materials which react with water produce large amount of the toxic gas included with the table 1 initial isolation protective action distance. To note that some of the water materials which are also toxic inhalation, poison inhalation in the U.S., are produced additional toxic inhalation materials when spilled in water. For these materials, the 2 entry provided in the table 1 initial isolation protective action distances. For spills on land and spills in water, it's not clearly whether spills are on land or in water. In case the spill occurs on both land and in water, choose larger protective action distance. For the tiling table 2, water reactive materials with the product produce toxic gas. List material with produce large amount of the toxic inhalation hazard gas will be spilled in water, but the toxic gas produced with the spilled in water. When water reactive toxic inhalation material is spilled with a river or stream, the source of the toxic gas may move the current stretch of the spill point downstream substance distance. Finally, table 3 lists an isolation protective action distance toxic inhalation materials may be commonly encountered in selected materials: ammonia and hydrous chloride, ethanol oxide, hydrogen chloride, and hydrogen chloride, refrigerated liquid, hydrogen fluoride, and hydrous sulfide dioxide. The materials presented with the alphabetical order provided initial isolation protective action distance. Large spills with more than 280 liters, 55 gallons of all different container types, therefore different volume capacity of the daytime, nighttime situation, different with the wind speed. Protective action and further factors of consideration. Choose the protective action for the given situation depending on the number of the factors. For some of the case of the evacuation, one of the best opinion with the shelter, or going to pay for the best source. Some insight. Sometimes these 2 actions must be contained in a combination. Emergency officials will need to give the public instruction. Public will need to continue information instruction while being evacuated, sheltered in place. Proper evaluation factors below determine effectiveness, evacuation in place, protection, shelter in place, importance of factors in carrying vary in emergency condition. Specific emergencies, other factors may be identified with considered as the listing kit last indicates what kind of information may be needed in initial decision. Dangerous goods, degree of health hazard, chemical, physical properties might involve contaminant, control of the release rate, the vapor movement, population threat, and location number of the people, the type of time available to evacuate and shelter in place, ability to control evacuation, shelter in place, building types, availability, special institution populations, nursing home, prisons, whether conditions affect on vapor cloud movement, and potential change of effect of the evacuation shelter in place. Your protective actions are those of the SHEP section that preserve health and safety of the emergency responder and public during an incident involving the release of the dangerous good. Table 1, initial isolation, protective action, distance, green border, pages predicts the size of the downwind, age of which go to effect with the cloud of the toxic gas. People in the area should be evacuated, sheltered, and placed inside buildings. Inside, isolate hazard area, deny entry means to keep everybody away from the area if they are not directly in emergency response operation. Unprotected emergency responders should not be allowed to enter the isolation zone. Isolation task is done first to establish control over the area of the operation. First step of the protection actions may be to follow. See Table 1, initial isolation, protective action, distance, green border pages for more detail on specific materials. Evacuate to move people away from threatened areas, safer place to perform evacuation. Move the enough time to be warned to get ready and leave in the area, enough time to evacuation, best activity action, being active evacuation, people to nearby outdoors, direct view of scenes. When additional help arrives, expand the area of the evacuated downwind, crosswind, at least for the extended recommended in this guidebook. Even after people to distance, so recommended must be complete with a safe from harm. They should be permitted to congregate in such distances. Evacuate different place specific route far enough away that it will not have moved again when wind shifts. Alright, shelters in place. Many people should seek shelter inside a building, remain inside until the dangers pass. Shelter in place is used when evacuating public would cause greater risks than staying where they are, and evacuation could not be performed. Direct people inside, close all doors, windows, shut off all ventilation, heating, cooling system in place. Protection. Shelter in place may not be best option. Vapors are flammable. It will take a long time for the gas to clear the area. See if the buildings could not be closely tight. Vehicles can offer some protection. Short period of windows are closed and ventilation system are shut off. Vehicles are not as effective as building in-place protection. It is vital to maintain communication. Competent person inside of the building so that they are advised about changing condition. Personal protected in place should be worn. Stay far from windows because of the danger of the glass protection, fat metal fragments of fire and explosion. Every dangerous good incident is different. Each will have special problems concerning the accident. Action with the protect of the public health may be selected carefully. These pages help with initial decisions how to protect the public, and officials may continue to gather information, monitor the situation until threat is removed. Alright, your background on Table 1 is initial isolation protective distance. Initial isolation protective action distances in this guidebook determine whether small and large spills occurring day or night. They are over-analysis statistically and utilize state-of-the-art emission rate, the dispersion models, statistical release, the U.S. Hazard Material Information System database, meteorological observation, over 120 locations in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and most current toxicological exposure guidelines. For each chemical thousandth hypothetical release model to account statistical variation, both release amount of the atmospheric condition based on statistical sample of the 90th percentile per protective action distance of each of the chemical categories selected for the period in the table. Brief description of the analysis provided below. A detailed report with the outlying methodology data of the U.S. generation isolation protective action distance may be obtained with the U.S. Department of Transportation Pipeline Hazard Material Safety Administration. Our release amount emission rate into the atmosphere statistically modeled based with the data of the U.S. HMIS database. Container type size of the authorized for the transport specified in Title 49 CFR 172.101 and 173. Physical property of the individual materials, atmospheric data of the historical database emission models, calculated release of the vapor due to evaporation pools on the ground, direct release vapor from the container. The combination of the both as liquid from gases which can flash to both vapor and aerosol mixture evaporating pool. Additional emission model also calculated with emission toxic vapor products generated with the spilling water reactive materials and water. Spills involve the release of approximately 55 U.S. gallons, and the 660 pounds or less are considered small spills, which small spills they involve greater quantities are considered large spills. Exempts in certain chemical warfare agents where small spills include release up to 4.4 pounds. Large spills include release up to 55 pounds. These agents are BZ, CX, GA, GB, GD, GF, HG, HL, HN1, HN2, HN3, L, and VX. Downward dispersion. Vapor was estimated each for the case model. Atmospheric parameters affecting dispersion immersion rate was selected the statistical fashion database containing hourly meteorological data for the 120 cities, United States, Canada, and Mexico. The dispersion calculation accounted for the time dependent on emission rate source as well. The density vapor plume heavy of gas effects since the atmospheric mixing less effective dispersing vapor plumes during nighttime and day. When separated in analysis, Table 1 defers to the daytime and refers to days after sunrise and before sunset. Night includes all hours of sun from between sunset and sunrise. Are your toxicological short-term exposure guideline materials will apply with determine the downwind distance weathers may occur, become anticipated, unable to take protective action, and may incur self-hazard effects from once in a lifetime exposure. Available toxicological exposure guidelines shows in the AEGL2 and ERPG2 emergency response guidelines. AEGL2 values being first choice for the materials do not have AEGL2, ERPG2 values emergency response guideline estimated lethal concentration limited derived by the animal studies where used as a recommended independent panel of toxicological expert in the industry academic. Alright, how to use Table 1 initial isolation protective action distances. The responder should already have the identified material ID number. The ID number cannot be found. Give the name of the material index blue border page to locate the number. Found 3-digit guide with the material in order to consult with the emergency with the action recommended jointly with its table. Note with the wind direction. Locate Table 1 green border page the ID number, the name of the material involved in the instance. The ID number to have more than one should be the name of the listed. Look at the specific name of the material in its item shown not in the table 1 list more than one number. Same ID. Use the entry in the largest protective action distances. Determine an incident that involves small or large spill day or night. Small spills consist of the release of the 55 gallons of UA and generally consider small packages, small cylinder, or small leak of a large package. Large spill consists of a release of more than 55 U.S. gallons, usually involved with a small or large package. Multiple spills of many spill package days at any time of the sunrise before sunset, night any time the sunrise and sunset and sunrise. Alright, 4. Look up the initial isolation distance defined by the radius zone of the initial isolation zone surrounding spill in all the direction of the zone. All public should be evacuated. Protective clothing, respiratory protection is required in this zone. Person should be directed to move out of the zone, directed perpendicular to the wind direction, crosswind, away from the spill, the minimum distance prescribed with the initial isolation distance. So if your initial isolation zone, initial isolation distance, and spill. Look up the protective action distance for the given material spill side of the weather, day or night. Table 1, give the down distance, kilometers and miles spill leak of the shore of the protective action should be considered for a practical purpose of protective action zone area in which people are at risk of harmful exposure and square whose length and width are the same as downwind. Distance shown in table 1, protective action of those who have taken to preserve the health and safety of the emergency responder in the public people area. This should be evacuated and sheltered in place. Or initiate protective action to the extent possible, beginning with the close of the spill site, working away with the site with the downward direction. Water reactive, toxic inhalation, poison inhalation in the United States. Producing material and spill within the river and stream. The source of the toxic gas may move current and stretch from the spill point downstream for a substantial distance. Shape area in which the protective action should be taken. The protective action shown in figure. Spill located with the center of the small circle of the large circle representing the initial isolation zone around the spill. Just upwind protective action zone, initial isolation zone, spill, wind direction, downwind distance, half the downwind distance, half the downwind distance, cross wind direction distance. See introduction to green table, the initial isolation protective action distances under the faction vectors mentioned with the protective action distance, page 289. When product table 1 has mentioned when small spilled in water, refer to table 2, water reactive material produces toxic gas. For a list of the gas produced by these materials are spilled in water, call emergency response telephone number listed and should be paid by the appropriate response agency as soon as possible. Additional information, material safety precaution, mitigation procedures. And then it goes through your table 1 for all these different green bordered this is all the table 1s, table 1s, table 1s. I'm looking for table 2, like and that might be it for the book unless I see the number of table 2 reading. Alright, table 2. How to use table 2 water reactive materials which produce toxic gases. Table 2 lists materials produce large amount of the toxic inhalation hazard and the U.S. gases spilled in water identify the toxic inhalation gas produces. The materials are listed in the ID number to order. These water reactive materials are easily identified in table 1 as they are immediately followed when spilled in water. Note, some of the water reactive materials are toxic inhalation materials themselves. In these instances, 2 entries are provided in table 1, land-based, water-based spills. Water reactive material is not a toxic inhalation material. The material is not spilled in water. Table 1 and table 2 do not apply, and safety distance will be found within the appropriate orange guide. Note number 2, materials classified in Division 4.3 as substance that on the contact with the water are liable to become spontaneous, flammable, to give off flammable, or sometimes toxic gas in dangerous quantities. For purposes of this table, the reactive materials or materials generate substantial qualities of toxic gas rapidly after after the spill of water. Therefore, materials classified as Division 4-3 will not always include Table 2. And then it goes into Table 2, your water-reactive materials which produce toxic gases. And that was your emergency response guide. You had your yellow bordered pages, blue bordered pages, orange bordered pages, green bordered pages, and then isolation evacuations, protective clothing, fire control, water, and bevel. Alright, bevel safety precautions, and we'll see how long that is. Alright, use caution following table to give the summary of the text, tank, props, and property, critical times, critical distance, cooling, water flow rates, various tank side of the tank. Table is provided to give the respondent some of the guidance, but it should be used in caution. Tank dimensions are approximately can vary depending on the tank design and application. Minimum to under failure based on severe torch and fire impingement, vapor space. Tank in good condition, approximately tank may fail earlier if they are damaged or corroded. Tanks may fail minutes or hours later. Minimum times depending upon the condition may be assumed here that tanks are not equipped with thermal barriers, water spray, cooling. Minimum time to empty based on the engulfing fire. Properly sized pressure relief valve of the tank is only purposely engulfed. The time the empty will increase. Once again, it has been assumed that the tank is not equipped with thermal barrier, water spray. Tanks equipped with thermal barrier, water spray, cooling significantly increase the most time failure to time to empty. The thermal barrier can reduce the heat input of the tank factor up to 10 or more. This means it can have 10 times as long as empty the tank through a pressure relief valve. Fireball radius of emergency response distance based on mathematical equations approximately assume the cylindrical fireball is not always the case. 2 safety distance public evacuation minimum distance based on the tank launch special elevation gauge few degrees above horizontal distance. Most common horizontal cylinders preferred evacuation distance has more marginal safety since assumed tanks are launched 45-degree angle of the horizontal. This might be appropriate vertical cylinder involved. If understood these distances are very large, most not practical in highly populated area, but it should be understood the risk increased rapidly closer to the BLEV. Keep in mind that for furthest reaching projectiles tend to come off in the zone of 45 degrees on each side of the tank ends. Water flow rate is based on 5% of the square root of capacity in U.S. gallons. U.S. gallons over minutes needed to cool the tank melting. Warning: the data given approximately should only be used with extreme caution. Example of the tank given the failure tank emptying through the pressure relief valve. These times are typically, but they can vary situation to situation. They're never realistic life based on these times. And then it shows the bevel or bevel using with caution. Our chemical terrorists use chemical radiological agents. And I'm going to cut the tape there, and we're just going to call that. That has a glossary at page 377, and that can put note for. This document should not be used to determine compliance with a dangerous hazard materials regulation or great work safety documents for specific chemicals. Note for sale: the document is intended for distribution free of charge of public safety organization by U.S. Department of Transportation copy. Canada, this copy may not be resold for the commercial distributors.